2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Martin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
And so you went full tilt.
Yeah, it started out sort of an experimental kind of thing, and I started smoking weed pretty regularly as well. It turned into, my entire life revolved around alcohol. Everything revolved around alcohol. All my relationships revolved around alcohol. Every single trip I went on, it was, where's the airport bar? How many drinks can I drink on the plane? After I got off the plane, where's the airport bar? Where's the bar in the hotel? Like everything. And you were mentioning about the concerts. I mean, I don't even remember. I used to promote concert tours and did concerts with like Rod Stewart and Usher and Kanye West, and people ask me about that time in my life. I'm like, I don't even remember it. Like, 'cause I was so drunk. I was just drinking all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there, done that. And so you go through that, and then you get into another relationship.
Yeah, I got into a really toxic relationship right after my divorce with a married woman. I don't know why I attract unavailable women, but for some reason that's sort of my MO. And she was an alcoholic, and that's when I really started drinking. I got a DUI on Thanksgiving, like 8 or 9 years ago, driving home from a party at her mother's house in Draper. And Colwood Heights cop pulled me over on I-215, and that's when the spiral all happened. Like you mentioned,
it took you straight to jail.
Took me to, well, no, they didn't book me. I haven't had a speeding ticket on my record. There was nothing. I had nothing on my record up to that point. And so I think they booked me. The Colwood Heights cop was nice enough and just let me go that night. My girlfriend came and picked me up from the station. But yeah, that started a sort of a spiral of active alcoholism for probably a good 8 or 9 years.
So the getting pulled over, that didn't
stop me. I got interlock in my car. Like I mentioned earlier, like I had my son blowing it for me. I got pulled over again with a friend coming home from a bar named Sue on Highland Drive in Holiday, and my license got suspended for 3 years. And then I had to get it. I was an interlock restricted driver for 3 years. I did that. That didn't stop me. That still didn't stop me.
And at that point, did your parents or loved ones or your ex-wife come and go, hey, look, you might want to look into this because we think you're drinking a little too much?
Yeah, they did. I think they saw the signs. I mean, my mom and dad dealt with my little brother with addiction, so they knew. I was completely oblivious to the idea that I was an alcoholic. Like I used to watch TV shows and people
Intervention.
And people would be like, I held my life pretty well together. I had a good job. I had I owned a couple houses. I was making money. I had this
career.
For
a lot of people, that strangely is our bar for.
I can't be an alcoholic. I've got all these things.
Yeah. So in Alcoholics Anonymous, they call like a high bottom drunk. You know what I mean? Or you're a
explain that to everybody.
You're a functioning alcoholic, which I think is a bunch of bull crap. It's just an excuse for you being an alcoholic, right? There's some stories that I can relate to with people saying, I lost it all. Like I didn't hit my bottom. I don't think there's a bottom. There's no rock bottom for me. There's just a bottomless pit. Like that I'll just keep digging and digging and digging until I die. Until I drink myself to death and my liver gives out or or whatever. That was where I was going.
But you didn't hit a rock bottom, but you did hit something to say, hey, look, this is not the direction I want to go anymore.
Yeah. You know, after that, you know, I got my second DUI, and I started to talk to my therapist, and he brought up the ideas of, hey, man, like, you might be an alcoholic. Like, because every single time you come in here.
How long had you been going to therapy?
Oh, geez. My ex-wife and I went to therapy pretty regularly. I mean, I've been active in therapy for probably a good 10 to 12 years.
And so pretty much all through that development of alcoholism, you were going to therapy.
Yep.
Let me ask you this. How forthright and forthcoming were you with your therapist about how much you were drinking?
Not very forthright. Yeah. Even in those, I'm a very open guy about my life now. But even during that process with him, there was still, I wasn't telling him that I was drinking every day. Mm-hmm. You know, I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, I went out with my friends this weekend and had a few beers.
Which too was a way of kind of glossing over the truth.
Right.
But when we gloss over the truth, it stops us from developing insight into that particular area. Yeah. So in therapy, a lot of times people are developing tremendous insights into different aspects of their life. But if they're not willing to kind of open a particular box, then we can't get in there. And so that's why I think both of you have mentioned today, a lot of times people don't know or don't care if they're an alcoholic. And I would say they're just not, they haven't developed that awareness.
Right.
I mean, they don't want to think too hard about it. So they say things like, I had a few beers with my friends this weekend.
Yeah.
You know?
And there was so many excuses in there, right? But at some point, you know, it started to affect every part of my life. I would go on these binges for days. I got into another relationship about 2 or 3 years ago with a fantastic girl, and she would drink occasionally, but I was drinking every single day with her, and absolutely ruined the relationship. One night I got super drunk, and you know, she was talking to me about something, and the alcoholism made two moods for me. It was either really funny or very emotional, and there was no telling which version of drunk Patrick would come out.
It was like a flip a coin.
Yeah, I was like, Patrick's gonna be the funnest guy in the room, or he could be the biggest jerk and like just cry all night. And it was like this truth serum that would come out, like all these deep-seated resentments that I had about her, about my relationship. And I blew up one night and just said, get out of my house. Like, I'm done with this. And that sort of was a catalyst for me to really realize that, okay, there's a big problem here.
You know, you asked the question, you know, Dr. Bennett, you brought it up that, you know, some people don't know or don't care. And it reminds me of something that my dad used to tell me. He said, don't ask a question that you don't want to know the answer.
Yeah, it's dangerous to ask questions you don't want to know the answer to.
You know, and
that includes ourselves.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. I never wanted to ask that question because I didn't want to know the answer. Because if I knew the answer, then I knew the problem and I knew I had to fix it. Yeah. If I never asked the question,
then you can stay in your ignorance. Right?
Ignorance sometimes is bliss.
Yeah.
You know.
Denial is, Freud called it the queen mother of defense mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
And so denial is something that we all use at times. But, man, it is a powerful thing. Everyone else that knows you can know you have a problem with something. But if you're stuck in your denial, you don't know it, or you're not willing to ask the question, I guess.
Yeah.
So you throw this wonderful girl out of your house.
Yeah.
You start to question what's going on with you.
Yeah.
Is that when you decided I might be an alcoholic?
Yeah, well, there was a couple stints where I took myself to the hospital because of binge drinking. I would drink for 4 days straight. My body would completely shut down, and I'd have to go and detox, which is pure hell. I didn't check myself into a treatment center, which if you are struggling with trying to wean yourself off, like, my advice, I'm not a professional, is to go to a detox center and do that professionally.
Right way.
I did it in my shower. literally for a week by myself. Several times I did that.
Which is extremely dangerous. I get calls all the
Very
time.
dangerous.
And, alcohol is one of the scariest substances to come off of. You can suffer seizures, permanent damage. So, a lot of people say they just want to white knuckle it in their bedrooms or their shower.
It was horrible. Yeah, I do not advise to do that. And I would go several months without drinking on my own. I went and checked out some treatment centers. Nothing really seemed to work for me. And so I was talking to my therapist, and my parents actually came with me to one of my therapy sessions, and they were obviously concerned. I guess you could call this an intervention of some sorts.
How old were you at this point?
Oh, this is a little over a year ago. So
okay.
I was 38, 37. My mom, my dad were sitting there and they're like, we don't know how to help you and we don't know what to do. That's why we're here. And my therapist said, you need some other help. Like, you can't stay sober. And I wanted to stay sober. And so I remember this vividly. It was after the Super Bowl last year. I went to a Super Bowl party and I hadn't drank for months. And then I got drunk that night. And then I went on a 4-day bender. From Sunday till Thursday. When I'm drinking, I shut off. And I'm a very attentive person when it comes to work and relationships. Normally, turned off my phone.
You ghosted everybody.
Which is very uncharacteristic of me. And I woke up and I was just done. I was just if you want to call that a bottom, I think that was it. It was just a feeling of desperation. They talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous, your life becomes completely unmanageable at that point. And I was there. I was so sick of feeling this way. I was so sick of having the dependency upon that substance to even function. I couldn't eat. Sleeping was a chore. The only time I could shut my brain off was when I was asleep. And I walked into my first AA meeting that morning and stood up and introduced myself and said, "Hey, I'm Patrick and I'm an alcoholic."
How did that feel?
It was a powerful moment for me. It wasn't hard for me to say for some reason. I think deep down inside, I knew from that first moment that I had that Budweiser when I was 15 on the cruise that I was an alcoholic, that I was an addict.
Maybe a feeling of powerlessness, it took over?
It did, yeah. It was they talk about it all the time that, as soon as that first, you can't have that one drink because I honestly didn't know what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I had no idea.
And that's interesting. You'd been not drinking for several months, and then you went to the Super Bowl party, and it kicked off this 4-day bender.
Yep.
It sounds like that solidified in your mind, I really can't control this.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Had you ever referred to yourself as an alcoholic before that?
I didn't. I knew I was a very heavy drinker. I knew that all my friends drank like I did. See, that's the thing about addiction and abuse and alcoholism. Usually you're in the midst of other people that have the same type behavior as you. And so you're comparing yourself to them and be like, oh, well, this guy, he's fine. Why is he not, struggling like I am? But a lot of those people can put it down.
Right.
They can drink like a normal person, right? They can go to the golf course and have a beer or two and be fine.
It's a race and I'm going to win.
Yeah. I'm going to go to the golf course and I'm going to have an entire 6-pack and then I'm going to finish a bottle of vodka when I get home.
Yeah.
And I'm going to drink by myself.
You're listening to Project Recovery. More with Patrick coming up.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. In October of 1985, a woman named Cherie Warren left work at a busy Salt Lake City office
to meet her estranged husband at a downtown auto dealership.
She never made it home. Cherie's car surfaced weeks later in Las Vegas.
In the parking lot of a hotel casino.
No one knows how it got there.
Strange. It was strange.
Both Cherie's estranged husband and her boyfriend raised suspicion for investigators.
I kind of thought that he might have done something.
But no arrests were ever made. In Cold Season 3, we dig into double lives, make new connections in the case, and examine the difficulty raised by reasonable doubt.
We want answers just as much as anyone else.
They have creeps like that now too, so nothing's changed.
That's the new Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, now available anywhere you get your podcasts.
Well, I think it's, I think it's interesting. I was half expecting when you said the story about having your first Budweiser at 15 that you were going to say something like most kids say, which is, "Oh, that's gross. I didn't like that," or "I didn't like how it made me feel. It made me feel swimmy or dizzy in my head. I didn't like that. It made me feel out of control." Mm-hmm. And a lot of kids who still may go on to develop substance abuse problems as they get older, that's their initial experience. Yours was, gotcha.
Yeah.
It was that hook.
Yeah, it was the same thing with the first time I smoked weed, too.
Okay.
It was that sort of that euphoria feeling, kind of like that, like I'm detached finally. My brain can stop swimming. I can slow down. And, it's a scary feeling, but it's also... It's a reason why people try to find that feeling until it stops working.
And I think that probably kind of stuck in your mind. That's why so many years later you were able to accept the fact that you had a problem with alcohol that was beyond your immediate control, was because it had registered somewhere deep inside. And I think that's one of the values of doing insight-oriented therapy is you learn how to think and connect with those deeper elements of who you are. You learn that self-reflection so that you can eventually be real honest with yourself about who you are and what you're about, what your strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah.
And so honesty brought you to your first 12-step meeting. You stood up and you told everybody in the morning that you were an alcoholic.
Yep.
And, I've talked about my first time in a 12-step meeting. This is the first time I didn't feel alone. There was 200 people in that room that felt just like I did.
Yeah,
and
that was
powerful.
That was powerful. And listening to the stories of people, I heard my story specifically a number of times in there.
I mean, your story is similar to my story, and that's why I wanted to do this podcast. So something really resonated with you in the 12-step program, and you kept going back. Are you still?
Yep, I'm active in recovery, and I have AA to thank for that. The community of AA here in Salt Lake and surrounding areas is fantastic. But one thing you have to do is you have to get in the middle of it. There's some action involved there. Like, I had to take that step. You got to go. You got to get a sponsor, and you have to be committed if you want to stay in this recovery thing. And talking about this stuff shouldn't be hard. There shouldn't be a stigma around it.
But according to the 12-step rules, talking about it is one thing that we shouldn't be doing.
There's a lot of there's the institution of AA. There's a lot of things I don't like about it. I'm incredibly open about my journey, about my involvement with. I'm not anonymous about it. Now, if they want to come and kick me out, which, I doubt they'll do, but, the beautiful thing about 12-step programs or AA, like, it's personalizable. You can make it work for you. There's a lot of people that like the traditions and things of that nature, but it's the only thing that's kept me sober. The only thing that's kept me sober.
Well, I like your point. I mean, first of all, side point, I think it needed to be anonymous back when it started because of the stigma around it. And now we live in a very different world where, people talk much more openly about those sorts of things. So I think the anonymous part is maybe less important now than it was at one point. But I really like what you said, and it's a life principle.
Yeah.
And that is you have to be all in to get results.
Yeah.
If you're going to do something and you kind of do it halfway, you get mediocre results. And your experience is being in AA, you've had to do a full commitment, but you're sober, is that right?
Yes, yeah, I'm sober, going on 10 months, which is a miracle. I couldn't go a single day without having a drink or smoking weed.
What do you think it is about the program that really is central for you? What's helping you the most?
For me, I can't speak for other people. For me, it's the accountability of it. It's I went to meetings and in recovery to stay sober, to stop drinking. But I've also learned have a community of people that I'm surrounded by that want to help me stay sober. It's a guideline for living life. Like the 12 steps are, if everybody went to AA and just listened to, how to be a better person, how to do an inventory and appreciation lists and, understanding what a higher power is. There's no idea of it. Like it could be whatever you want. It's not this preachy religious thing, which I thought it was when I first went there. It's like, you got to believe in God. And it's not like that at all. Like it's a God of your understanding. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's, the idea of the universe seems plausible to me, but I have to sort of give myself up to this idea of I can't keep myself sober. And whatever it is, whatever this juju that I'm drinking right now, it's working.
And that's what I say. Whatever's working for you, let it work. Don't fight it. So what does recovery look like for you right now? How often are you going to meetings?
I went to 90 meetings in 90 days.
They say the 90 and 90.
Yeah. That's something that I highly suggest you do. Throw yourself in the middle of AA. So now I'm working with a sponsor, going through the steps. We meet every day. We read the big blue book. You'll learn about that if you go. And I go to 4 to 5 meetings a week. I've got side of a rotation of meetings that I go to. I talk to an alcoholic almost every single day, just to check in. And,
checks and balances.
Yep. I meditate. I wasn't a big prayer, but, I try to wake up and feel appreciation and, thank whatever for keeping me sober today. I
want to ask you something about your child. Because he's about 11, is that correct?
Yep, he's 11.
And I see him on Instagram, and you look like a wonderful father, and it feels like you're very open with your son.
Yes.
What does your son think about this?
So I didn't realize how bad it affected him, but it did. About a month and a half ago, he had a really hard day at school. He was kind of bullied. He goes to a private school, and the school called me, and he came home, and I hadn't seen him like this before. And we're very open. We talk about feelings and emotions, and I want him to tell me, what's going on. And he just broke down. Like, he just broke down on me, and I couldn't console him. And I had some, I just had this feeling come over me of like, you need to ask him what he thinks about your drinking and how it affected him, because I never asked him that before. I haven't asked for, his forgiveness for what I put him through. And he said to me through tears that he was so scared for me during this entire process. Like, he thought I was going to die. And he said that to me. And I was absolutely just stunned and taken back, because I was so selfish in my disease that not even my own son, who I would lay my life down for him, could keep me sober. And it affected him. This affects kids in your life. If you don't think it does, and that's
a lot of weight for a
11-year-old. Yeah.
To think that every time he leaves and you're going to start drinking, is this the time Dad dies?
And that's what happened, right? He would go with Mom. He knew every single time that I was on one of my binges. Like, I didn't drink a lot. I didn't drink a lot around him, because I wanted to hide it. Or if he was asleep, I'd have a few beers. And but I had that interlock in my car. Like, he knew what was going on.
Kids are smart.
Yeah,
they know.
He's a bright child. Like, he doesn't need a lot of direction. Like, kids are tuned in. Like, they get it. So
at the same time, kids, in those elementary years are what we call egocentric, or they see the world first from their own point of view, and that's a normal developmental thing. It's not selfishness or anything like that. But one of the side effects of that is they have a hard time abstracting and seeing things from other people's points of view. They develop that, junior high and on. And so your son, it makes sense, his biggest need in life was to be supported, loved by his mom and dad, and feel that security. And so anything that would rock that is very detrimental to their own sense of security. So like when a parent loses a job, or there's a divorce in the family, or a parent is struggling with an addiction, it really rocks that kid's sense of, am I going to be okay? What's going to happen in my life if my dad's gone? And he's worried about dad, and he's worried about his own survival. And that's pretty heavy stuff for a kid to process. Yeah. And as adults, we can abstract and think, okay, well, this is a problem, but, there's treatment. Like we can kind of justify or navigate it a little bit, the what ifs and the could be's and the maybes. But kids don't do that naturally. And so I bet it was very tough for him. And it's, forgive the pun, sobering as a parent to have him talk to you about it. How did that affect you? How did it make you feel?
It was quite a humbling moment for me. Like, I consider myself a pretty present parent. Even during my drinking, it was very important to me to, we did a really good job of raising him, and I was a stay-at-home parent for the most of his early adulthood. So it was hard. It was hard to hear that. It was hard to see him. I appreciated him expressing that to me, and he knows how important my sobriety is and my recovery is.
What did you say to him when he said that?
I told him that, it's taken me a long time to realize that I have a problem. And I told him that I am an alcoholic, and that I talked to him about my recovery and these meetings that I'm going to. And, he's independent enough now that I can leave him at home for an hour and go hit a meeting, and come back. So
what does he think about the fact that you're doing that?
He loves it. Yeah, he says to me all the time. He says, Dad, I can see the light in your eyes again. And he can tell that I'm not, I don't have to blow into an interlock in my car anymore.
Yeah.
He's mentioned that several times, like how relieved he is. That I don't have to do that anymore.
Sure.
So it
went from a sense of insecurity about dad to now you've brought him in on the process.
Yep.
He was affected by it on the one hand, being a victim of it, and now he's part of that. He understands the solution that's taking place, and I think that's a very grounding experience.
It is,
for him.
yeah. Sobriety has to be the most important thing in my life. It has to be before my son, even, which is, some people be like, wait, your kid's the most important thing. I'm like, well, here's the thing. I cannot show up for anybody, especially him, for my job, for my family, for any of my friends, if I am not sober. And that has to be number one in my life forever. It can't just be for a month. It can't just be for these past 10 months. It has to be my number one goal forever until my bones die. Or else, it'll take me down that path of destruction that, almost killed me several times.
Man, this one really got me because, I see a lot of similarities in your story and my story. And, just being able to take my daughter to that concert and have my kids, say goodbye to me and know that.
Well, I was thinking about when you talked about when you first realized how much your drinking had affected your kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's something people need to be aware of. If you're out there listening to the show and you're struggling in your alcoholism and you think it's not really affecting your kids or they're not noticing, think again. Listen to both these stories.
They are noticing.
It affects them directly, and they're a lot more aware of what's going on than we give them credit for.
I think Patrick said it best. They're tuned in.
Yeah.
And they know. Hey, what advice would you give to family members out there?
If you're struggling with addiction, like just tell somebody, get some help. There's so many resources out there for people that are struggling. If you are interested in AA, there's an app, there's a meeting app that you can download on your phone.
Know where all the meetings are.
Knows where all the meetings are.
Do you have to pre-book, or can you just show
Nope,
up?
you can show up. There's meetings from 6 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night.
I've had people argue with me about that, and I know why, because they don't want to do it.
No, yeah,
But
I've heard every excuse under the sun.
You can just show up.
You can show up.
You're welcome, aren't you?
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime, day or night, drunk, high, sober or not. Like, come to a meeting. You can reach out to me. I'll take you to a meeting. I'll come pick you up.
We give them fashion tips?
I will give them fashion tips.
Cool.
He's fashion
show. Fashion
fashion
show.
forward.
I'm going to call him for
Fashion
that.
show
You
at
need
work.
I do.
Dr. Matt, any last thoughts?
I really appreciate you sharing your story, and I know that it's a small but a big part of the story is your relationship with your son, and
Yep.
I hope people will tune into that as part of their takeaway from your message.
Well, I hope so too. Yeah, it's incredibly important to me that the people talk about this stuff, and if I can share my story and help one person, then I've done my duty.
There you go. Hey, thanks for listening. If you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call. You're listening to Project Recovery, a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.